You're listening to A Mighty Fortress.
Hello and welcome to A Mighty Fortress. I'm your host, Knight Jake. A Mighty Fortress is a show for confessional Lutherans. If you need to seek refuge from the false teaching of this world and find confessional Lutheran teaching, you've come to the right place. Now, in today's episode, I'd like to discuss a topic that's a little bit touchy. It's Luther and the Jews. Now, Luther wrote very widely on the Jews, and there's actually quite a lot to go into and quite a lot to consider. Now, a lot of the comments Luther makes, I think plenty of people wouldn't agree with today. And there's heaps of comments that I wouldn't agree with. And if anybody's looking for a book that's really helpful in the issue of finding what Luther wrote, here's a good chance for us to play Knight's Library.
That's enough for one day. I think I'll read a book.
The book I'm talking about is Martin Luther, the Bible and the Jewish People, a Reader. Edited by Brooks Scram and Kersai Sojourner. I don't know how to say that last name, so forgive me if I got that wrong. Either way, this book is actually quite an excellent book on giving you the resources for all the writings that Luther did on the Jews. It pretty much just gives a brief summarization of every writing of Luther that had some comments towards the Jews. Now, like I said, this is a very broad topic, and there's quite a lot that Luther said concerning the Jews. A lot of positive things, a lot of negative things. It's a very broad issue. I specifically am going to be focusing on something a little bit different. I'm going to be looking at the issue on whether Luther was, how I say this, a Nazi. Was Luther a Nazi, or did Luther's teachings of the Jews influence Hitler and the Nazi Party? And to do that, I'm not going to look at all of what Luther wrote on the Jews. Instead of going to such a broad spectrum of what Luther wrote, I'm going to focus it down to 5 treatises that Luther wrote on the Jews in his lifetime. They are That Christ Was Born a Jew, written in 1523, Against the Sabbatarians, Letter to a Good Friend, written in 1538, On the Jews and Their Lies, written in 1543, On the Infallible Name and the Lineage of Christ, also written in 1543, and On the Last Words of David, also written in 1543. Now, that's the 5 treatises that Luther wrote concerning Jews in his lifetime, and it's these specific 5 treatises that I'm going to go through. Now, I need to start with, yes, it is true that the Nazi Party, in establishing the Reichschurch, actually used Luther's writings to, justify what they were doing and to convince the Christians in Germany that what the Nazi Party was doing was actually right. And so, yes, the Nazis did use Luther's writings to influence Christians in Germany. However, I'd argue that the Nazi Party themselves were not influenced by Luther's writings, but instead manipulated or at least misquoted Luther's writings. And when I say misquoted, I don't mean like they actually took Luther out of context and said it wrong, but yes, they deliberately found those negative quotes of Luther and played them up instead of looking at the positive things Luther said as well. Luther does say a lot of good things about the Jews as well. Generally, his comments against the Jews that are negative did happen later in his life. That's very typical late Luther. He seemed to get very cranky, and in Luther's life, he truly understood that the gospel message was at stake. And he got really angry when people were destroying the gospel message. So whether that be the Catholics, the enthusiasts, the Reformed, Muslims, Jews, whatever, Luther got really mad at people that weren't preaching the true gospel. And he got so furious at these people that he actually said some rather harsh things and rather condemning things that I myself wouldn't say. one important thing to understand is that Luther didn't just focus on the Jews. He actually attacked all heretics out there and all false teachers. And yes, I would say that Jews, because they deny Jesus Christ, I would say that they are heretics and false teachers, because they reject the Messiah and they reject Lord Jesus Christ. They deny the Trinity. So, yeah, they're not Christian. So, therefore, they're heretics. That's logic. Anyway, Luther got fed up with these people and he attacked them. He didn't just attack the Jews, he attacked all false teachers. So don't think that Luther was focusing purely on the Jews. And as I'm going to talk about later, when I say Jews, Luther was focusing on the Judaic religion and the teachings of Judaism, not on the actual race known as the Jewish people. That's actually a very important distinction that needs to be made when looking at what Luther says about Jews, because he doesn't look at them as a race, he looks at them as another religion. And so his comments are theological and religious based, not racial. So Luther was not a racist. Now, since Luther's works were used by the Nazi regime to form the Reich Church and to defend their actions before the larger Christian community, Luther's writings on the Jews have been demonized and shunned. Throughout Luther's career, he wrote numerous works on the Jews, including negative and positive views. While some of what he said goes way too far and cannot be justified or reasonable, Luther's negative views on the Jews are not the same as the anti-Semitic views of the Nazi Party, and Luther never supported the idea of something that would lead to the devastation of the Holocaust. Now, in order to go through this, instead of looking at all Luther's letters, commentaries, sermons, lectures, everything, table talks, instead of looking at all that, I'm just going to focus on the 5 treatises that Luther wrote on the Jewish people. That are, that Jesus Christ was born a Jew, Against the Sabbatarians, letter to a good friend, on the Jews and their lies, on the infallible name and on the lineage of Christ, and on the last words of David. Now, while on the Jews and their lies has been demonized due to its hardline approach towards the Jews and used by the Nazi regime to create the Protestant Reich Church, each treatise contains a deeply theological and biblical discussion surrounding the Jews. While they are in some ways similar, they are each separate works, and it is best to view them in this way. Now, because of Hitler's use of Luther's works, many anti-Christian or anti-Lutheran thinkers have deemed him an anti-Semite or a Nazi. Disappointingly, it is a fact that Hitler and the Nazis used Luther's works, mainly on the Jews and their lies, to justify their actions before the German Lutherans, which at that point in time represented over 50% of the German population. It was never Luther's intent for a mass genocide of the Jewish people. In Luther's early years, he did not only support the Jews, but he criticized the papacy for the papacy's harsh treatment of Jews. The young Luther had a high respect for the Jewish people as God's chosen race and was extremely optimistic and maybe somewhat even naive that he planned that they could be converted to Christianity. His hatred for the Jews grew out of failed attempts to convert them and fearful suspicions fueled by popular anti-Jewish propaganda and a combination of true and false accusations. While it may not justify the cruel things that Luther wrote, he was not the first or the cruelest person to write against the Jews. Numerous people before and after Luther wrote disapproving things on the Jews, including the church fathers such as Clement, Justin Martyr, St. Ambrose, St. Gregory, etc. John Chrysostom, in his 8 homilies, that's sermons, entitled Against the Jews, writes that although such beasts are unfit for work, they are fit for killing. And this is what happened to the Jews. While they were making themselves unfit for work, they grew fit for the slaughter. And that's John Chrysostom. That's like a 3rd or 4th century Christian father, not Luther. So if you actually want to find harsh things about the Jews, you can find heaps of people beyond Luther, both before and after him. including people up to the 20th century, because, as people may not realise, Hitler's ideas that the Jews were evil was not something that Hitler came up with. That was a common thought that was travelling around scholars and philosophy in the 20th century in Europe. Hitler just had the manpower to do what a few or maybe even a lot of people were thinking. And no, I don't approve of that thought, and no, I don't think that's a right way to think. I don't think it's a good idea at all to go and cause a mass genocide of any race, whatever they are, and whatever the beliefs are. I don't think we should do that. We're called to love our neighbour, not to kill our neighbour. And so, let's get back to the treatises. Luther did not always write so negatively on the Jews. In 1523, he wrote his first and most positive treatise concerning the Jews, entitled That Jesus Christ Was Born a Jew. Luther wrote this after Archduke Ferdinand had accused him of preaching a false doctrine in which Joseph was Jesus' biological father. Through him, Jesus was born of Abraham's seed. Luther defends himself against this wrongful accusation, and after defending the virgin birth and Jesus' Jewishness, he takes the opportunity to convince the Jews of Jesus' messiahship. We would also like to do a service to the Jews, on the chance that we might bring some of them back to their own true faith. Luther finishes his treatise with a strong defence of the Jews, in which he slanders the papal law and those who try to force conversion upon the Jews, and says that the Jews have been forced into usury because Christians refuse to trade with them or let them do honest labour. Luther says the best way to convert them is to work alongside them, show them Christian love, and allow them to witness the Christian life. And in his conclusion, Luther has an interesting thought that Christians are not morally superior to Jews, and why he rightly acknowledges their erroneous beliefs that Jesus isn't the Messiah. He doesn't condone forced conversion. Instead he says, if some of them, that's the Jews, should prove stiff-necked and therefore not convert and accept Jesus as Christ, what of it? After all, we ourselves are not all that good Christians either. What of it? After all, we ourselves are not all good Christians either. This statement closes the argument, declaring that since we Christians stumble in our faith, that if the Jews find Christ to be a stumbling block, then let them live in peace. In 1538, we can see that Luther's anger begins to form against the Jews, and that can be demonstrated in his treatise on the Jews entitled Against the Sabbatarians, Letter to a Good Friend. This work is best viewed not separately, but simply as a gateway into Luther's later work of 1543 on the Jews and their lies, since much of the arguments contained in the former is reused in the latter. The most useful line in this entire work is found in the opening lines of the debate. In the first place, the Jewish people have become very stubborn because of their rabbis. As a result, they are difficult to win over. The importance of these two lines is threefold. Firstly, it states his anger against the stubbornness of the Jews, despite his what of it from his earlier treatise. Secondly, he reveals that his growing hatred of the Jews is rooted in the fact that they are difficult to win over, and thus his dreams of conversion are failing. And thirdly, Luther declares that his anger is not directly targeted at all Jews, but at the stubborn and lying rabbis, an issue that he will later refer to in his On the Jews and Their Lies, where he reiterates a conflict he had with 3 Jews in Wittenberg who tried to convert Luther to Judaism. He records that when he was victorious against them in a debate, they fled, saying that they were obligated to believe the teachings of their rabbis. It was incidents like this which contributed to Luther's developing hatred towards Jews. These 2 treatises cover the numerous reasons why Luther's views of the Jews began to shift from positive to negative. In addition to the fact that the Jews were stubborn to convert to Christianity, the Jewish people were attempting to convert Christians to Judaism, which resulted in the development of the Sabbatarian movement. and little is known of the Sabbatarians except that they were largely influenced by a literal interpretation of the Old Testament and therefore believed in a complete observance of the Jewish Sabbath and Jewish laws. Luther criticized them in his lectures on Genesis, mocking them and sarcastically and rhetorically asked if they will insist on circumcision and the rest of the Mosaic law. Luther blames the Jews for this movement, referring to the Sabbatarians as the apes of the Jews. Further contributing factors to Luther's anti-Jewish treatises was the surrounding society and fellow Christian theologians. Luther's writings were greatly curbed by earlier and fellow Christian writers who shared his anti-Jewish views. The most influential of these writers are Anthony Mugaritha, who Luther not only quotes but promotes. For further information on the devilish practices with such numbers and words, you may read Anthony Mugaritha. Mugaritha was a Jewish convert to Christianity, whose work, The Whole Jewish Faith, published more than a decade before Luther's On the Jews and Their Lies, greatly influenced Luther. Having been raised a Jew, Mugaritha knew of all the Jewish wickedness, and his work contained accusations that Jews committed blasphemy against Jesus and Mary, were guilty of usury and theft, and they wished to violently overthrow Christian authorities. As Screm writes in his book, which I quoted before, while numerous false accusations were circulating during this era, there had been strong anti-Christian themes running through the Jewish literature since the 12th century, attacking the beliefs of Christianity and praying for their destruction. This anti-Christian ideology is best exemplified in the 13th century Jewish work, The Book of Victory. Even though Mugaritha's claims were most likely true, 16th century Germany was full of false claims and anti-Jewish propaganda, including rumours that the Jews poisoned wells, kidnapped children and drained them of their blood for religious rituals, practiced witchcraft and idolatry, and murdered Christians for their religious merit. It is here where Luther makes a grave mistake. He has been a true eyewitness to the Jewish stubbornness, lies and anti-Christian slander. But Luther also assumes the claims of murder and sorcery. Whether it is true or not, I do not know, that they do not lack the complete, full and ready will to do such things either secretly or openly. Therefore, Luther may have been accusing the Jews of false crimes. Now, although Luther did not invent anti-Jewishness, he promoted it to a level never before seen in Europe. Luther was neither the first nor the last Christian theologian to speak harshly on the Jews, but his On the Jews and Their Lies, and even some of his table talks, go above and beyond what was reasonable for that time. This treatise, which we have briefly skimmed over above, is best viewed when broken into 4 separate parts. In the first part, Luther deals with the false teachings and boastings of Jewish theology, and he condemns the Jewish ideology. They think they are racially superior and religiously more pious because they have the Mosaic laws, circumcision, and lineage of the patriarchs. Here Luther is justified in condemning such false doctrines. Now in the second and longest section, Luther dives into a theological debate arguing against the Jewish exegesis of the Old Testament, and instead he exalts the Christological interpretations of the Old Testament. In the third section is where Luther takes a strict tone to condemn the Jews on their blasphemies against Jesus and the Virgin Mary. Here too, Luther is justified. He doesn't go unnecessarily harsh against the Jews, and he rightly took up the charge to refute such anti-Christian hatred. But section 4 is the most notorious. In this section, Luther takes his hardline approach against the Jews, calling for both secular and ecclesiastical authorities to take action against the Jews. In this section, Luther replaces his friendly soft-touch approach at conversion from his first treatise, and instead calls for a violent and forceful approach to conversion against the Jews, which is unreasonable and unnecessary. It is this section that many anti-Semitic or Nazi or neo-Nazi groups have used in defense of their actions. And it's this section that has given Luther such a bad reputation when concerning the Jews. Luther's main goal here is to follow the example of Spain, France, and England and expel the Jews from his country and send them back to their fatherland Israel. Luther's suggestion for forced conversion is only a secondary solution in case they refuse to leave the countries. So in other words, Luther's asking that all Jews be exiled and sent back to Israel. But if they refuse to move, then we need to forcibly convert them. I just want to make a point here that I don't agree with either of those views of Luther. Just making that clear. Luther states in his fourth section that since we cannot extinguish the unquenchable fire of divine wrath, of which the prophets speak, nor can we convert the Jews, we must practice a sharp mercy to see whether we might save at least a few from the glowing flames. Many critics of Luther associate this section of the treatise with the Jewish Holocaust, and it is impossible to distinguish this section without noting how similar to his proposals were the actions of the Nazi Party. However, the Nazis surpassed even Luther's severity. In this section of Luther's on the Jews and their lies, Luther calls for both the civil authorities and the church authorities to take action against the Jews to snuff out the flames of their lies and blasphemous doctrines. Luther goes far beyond the limits of reasonable and justifiable arguments. He calls for the burning of synagogues and Jewish homes, the confiscations and burnings of their Talmuds, prayer books, and to the worst extent, even their Hebrew Bibles. He calls for the political leaders to abolish safe conduct of Jews and to prohibit the Jews from usury and to enforce manual labour. Luther also calls for the suppression of Jewish belief systems. Along with the destructions of their places of worship, he also ordered that the rabbis be forbidden to teach and that no Jew is ever allowed to utter the name of God in public. It is important to note that Luther does not call for the annihilation or genocide of the Jews, for he still longs to save at least a few of them from the glowing flames. Luther later reaffirms this dream of conversion after he calls for a prohibition on usury and says that if a Jew is sincerely converted, he should be given some financial support. All these calls for action, while harsh and violent, are done in the name of conversion. The error here is that conversion should not be forced. A person should believe by faith and not fear. Forceful conversion only causes an outward conversion, and God only looks at the inward belief of his children. If a Jew, or anyone for that matter, was to outwardly proclaim Christ crucified, but inwardly rejected him, then it is no better off than if they declared in public that Jesus was the heretical son of a whore, as the Jews did. Later, in 1543, Luther wrote a further 2 treatises against the Jews, on the infallible name and on the lineage of Christ, and on the last words of David. The first was written regarding the medieval Jewish practice of Kabbalist sorcery. Kabbalist sorcery was a form of witchcraft believed to have been developed by the Jews during the Babylonian exile, in which the Jews believed that they could perform miracles by correctly pronouncing the infallible name of God, in other words, Yahweh. Luther first became aware of this through his favourite anti-Jewish Hebraist, Mugaritha. Luther charges into this issue using Porcicus, a 13th century anti-Jewish theologian, summary of the Toledot Yeshu. The Toledot Yeshu is a medieval anti-gospel written prior to the 9th century by anti-Christian Jews and translated into Latin in the 13th century by Dominican monks. This writing claims Jesus was an illegitimate child of a whore who seduced women, died a shameful heretic, and that both Jesus and his disciples practiced sorcery using the infallible name. Part 1 of Luther's treatise is targeted against the Kabbalic use of the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, and a criticism of the civil authorities for their toleration of the Jews. Between the writings on the Jews and their lies, where Luther calls for a violent forced conversion, and his writing on the infallible name and on the lineage of Christ, Luther has given up all hope of converting the Jews, and he states that it is better that his intentions were not to write against the Jews, as if I hoped to convert them, but to warn our Christians about them, and also to strengthen and honour our faith. Luther goes to a state that converting the Jews is an impossible task, as impossible as converting Satan, and that a Jewish heart is as hard as a stick, a stone, as iron, and as the devil. The second part of his treatise is less critical towards the Jews and focuses on the Divinic lineage of the Virgin Mary, based upon the conflict genealogies of Jesus in Matthew and Luke. Joseph the carpenter being descended from the Matthean line, and the Virgin Mary from the Lucan line. While Luther is justified in arguing against and bad-mouthing the anti-Christian Toledote Jesu, he, in typical Luther fashion, goes beyond reason and calls all Jewish interpretations of the Bible Jewish and sweat. Forgive my language, but that's what Luther wrote. Luther even goes yet another step further and takes the term children of the devil, a common term for non-Christians derived from the Johannine literature, and adds to it that the Jews worshipped Satan and claimed the devil as their god. It's this fourth treatise of Luther that went so harsh against the Jews that it's never actually been translated into English fully. For this assignment, I was only able to get small snippets of it that have been translated. Most of that treatise has not been translated to English, and you can only find it in German because of its very, very harsh, unreasonable, unjustifiable condemnations and negative comments towards the Jews. Now, for Luther's fifth and final treatise on the Jews, he backs down a bit and takes it a little easier on the Jews. Luther writes his treatise to warn his fellow Christians on Jewish commentaries of the Old Testament, because they reject Jesus and lie against the true Jews of Israel, that is, against the apostles and prophets. He says to reject all Jewish commentaries because if they truly believed and interpreted Moses correctly, then they would all believe in Christ. Therefore, Luther writes his final treatise as a soft blow against the Jews, which forms a nice sandwich with Luther's treatises, placing a chunk of unreasonable hatred between two slices of justifiable kindness and gentle correction. Now, sadly, it has become the default position of many anti-Lutheran or pro-Jewish activists to condemn Luther as a Nazi. They blame the entire Holocaust on either the writings of Luther or on Lutherans themselves. Now, firstly, in defense of the church, although the Nazis founded the Reich Church, and that church believed in the anti-Jewish Nazi regime, it was the Nazi party and not the Reich Church that enacted the killings of the Jews. And secondly, in defense of Luther, it is both foolish and even pro-Nazi to blame the Holocaust on his writings. For if this is done, then the blame of the Holocaust is removed from Hitler and to Luther. The reason why Luther cannot and should not be blamed for the Holocaust is twofold. Firstly, there's a major difference in Luther's writings and Hitler's view of the perfect race. Luther is not an anti-Semite in the modern racist sense of the word. He was an anti-Jewish person. He was against the religion, not the race. Hitler, however, while he was born a Catholic, did not remain a Christian, and his anti-Semitic views were based on revenge and actually on evolution. The Nazi Party sought revenge on the Jews for their funding of the Allies during World War I, and Hitler's evolutionary views of the perfect Aryan race were key to his hatred of the Jews. So while Luther based his hatred on biology and targeted the nationality group known as the Jews, Luther, however, focused simply on the religious organization of Jews and their rejection of Christ. The best explanation in this concept is that Hitler was anti-Semitic race, and Luther was anti-Judaic, against the Judaic religion and not the Jewish race. However, we cannot deny the negative comments that Luther said about the Jews, and we cannot attempt to justify them. A lot of what Luther said was unreasonable, unjustifiable, and should be condemned. Luther did also say a lot of positive things about the Jews, and we can't forget them either. We should actually emphasize those positive things that Luther said, and why we should not ignore or deny that Luther wrote harshly against the Jews. We need to learn from that and not repeat what Luther did. When it comes to the Jewish people, yes, we should always try to convert them. And yes, their teachings are false. But we should never force conversion on them. We should never attack them or harm them. We should not burn their synagogues or their schools or their writings. We should not attack the people themselves. We should attack their false teachings through theological discussion. And hopefully, through the gospel message that Jesus Christ died for them also, we may be able to bring them to Christianity. Have them realize that Jesus is their Messiah just as much as he is our Messiah. More so because he actually was the Jewish Messiah and they are the Jewish race. Jesus died for Jews just as much as he died for Gentiles. And God wants all people, Jew and Gentile, to be saved. Therefore, the important thing to remember is that we need to go out and preach the gospel to the whole world and bring all people to a true understanding of what it means to believe in the Christian faith, what it means to believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins. Well, I've been your host. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you can join us again next time. Thank you, goodbye, and